very glad that you're watching and listening to this program. This is a program that brings you business ideas and business tips. We bring a panel of experts who come and help you grow your business. They help you navigate the challenges that you may be facing. In this connection, we have the numbers on your screen. Please ask us questions. Feel free to send to these numbers. We are live on Facebook, on YouTube. Consider subscribing, liking, and sharing this program so that it can reach many more people. And we also live on Faith Today Television. Today we have a conversation with a promising young lawyer on navigating the legal landscape. And with me on my immediate right is Mr. Keriba Kariuki. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Doctor.
Can you tell us just basically who are you and what do you do?
Thank you, Doctor. My name is Keriba Kariuki, as Dr. rightly puts it. I am an advocate of the High Court of Kenya with a 13-year experience in the governance and advocacy landscape, principally interested in corporate and commercial law, and also other areas of advocacy that support in business development as well as policy and legislative development.
That is a very good one because we want to discuss business today, and our viewers are used to hearing a lot of business talk. And today we want to bring the angle of how a lawyer can help their businesses to grow and why they need lawyers to help them. On my immediate left is Enoch. Enoch, welcome and introduce yourself to the viewers.
Well, thank you so much, Doctor. I am so excited to be on this panel today, and I'm very excited to face on with Mr. Kariuki. We've had a number of discussions on this panel about real estate, and something that is really outstanding is they always talk about doing due diligence. They always talk about having a lawyer in the picture. So I always desire to have that time when we can really have a lawyer come and give us his expertise, his advice on these on such matters. So I'm really excited, and of course I also want to welcome back the young people. We had a conference at Juja Faith Premier High School. It was an exciting time, and I also want to commend all those who are following us. This is a good time. Just stay tuned. There is a lot to learn today. May God bless you. Thank you.
So once again, viewer, remember to send your questions to us. If you have a burning question that you'd want to ask a lawyer, today is free of charge. We'll answer it live and direct today. So before we get into that, can you maybe describe your professional journey? How did you find yourself as a lawyer?
That's a very interesting question. I grew up in what we'd like to call an informal settlement in Kawangware. And ideally, what we have is a very clear social-economic imbalance from a background perspective. And my motivation principally was to just support the improvement of fairness in the judicial system, because I also grew up around a lot of injustice. As it were, during my age, there was a lot of police brutality as I was growing up. There was a lot of land grabbing and taking advantage of the weaker in the society. And for me, I think my principal entry point was when we had a similar experience coming up. And I realized that it had to start with me in terms of the change that I would want to see. And that motivated me from the onset. From nursery school, I knew exactly where I wanted to be, was within the judicial system, to see how best I can improve building systems. And that's the bulk of my career currently. So I was able to then go through the motions like every high school student, and I ended up at the University of Nairobi, where I was able to take my undergraduate and subsequently joined the Kenya School of Law for my postgraduate that now enabled me to practice law. And in keeping with my intention to build systems, I had to get a Master's of Public Policy and Administration. So my journey has been guided by the insistent urge to be the change that I want to see. So that is how I ended up being an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, and that is principally what has built my practice to this point.
Did I hear you correctly that at nursery school you were very clear you wanted to become a lawyer, or is it?
Yes, you heard me very correctly. I was able to see some experiences coming up where my grandparents at the time had to go through a very difficult transition around a succession process. And when you're working through a system that was very guided by patriarchal community systems, you find that the weaker participants in that process will end up losing. And in keeping with that, I was able to start asking questions. What was missing in this particular perspective? And I was able to realize that what was missing is a gap in a prudent advocate and an advocate who could have been trusted by the families at the time. And that was not just my own story, it was also the story of, excuse me, of so many communities of so many members of my community that I grew up with. So accordingly, I felt that gap needed to be bridged, and that I took responsibility for it, and I had that clarity from the onset. I know he would understand more when we talk about these small books that people usually write in class 8. What do you want to be? Where will you be in 10 years? I can authoritatively say that if you could track down any of those books that I filled, you could see that I was clear that I wanted to be a lawyer.
So you've been consistent all along?
Yes, I've been consistent.
And very clear on what you want to become.
Absolutely.
So what advice do you have for someone who is in school, he's in secondary school, high school, and he's thinking of career choice? Would you advise him to become a lawyer? And what would you tell him? Would you advise him to go around it?
I would give a very specific advice to young people, and I think I borrow a lot from my learning from Miles Monroe, who talks about what your gifts can do for you. From a biblical perspective, it says that your gifts will make room for you. And the idea is you must understand what your gifting is. And then secondly, as we talk about the parable of the seeds and where they fell, there's an obligation for you to cultivate and hone that gift to become profitable. Because from the context of even a kingdom approach, then the aspect is if you're not fruitful, if you're not productive, then the idea is you will end up falling by the wayside. So I'd give advice that start honing your skills at an early age and start understanding that there's a room that you need to create for yourself. The general assumption is room will create itself or something, but some of these spaces you have to force issues to the extent that you know what you want, and then you build your own knowledge base, and then you push towards the intended outcome. Necessarily and intentionally towards a very clear objective. So provided there's a vision in terms of where you want to go and you intentionally pursue it, then yes, I would advise them to pursue law if it is an area of passion, because it builds from what you feel gifted to do, and then you build on that from a passion perspective, and then you create room for yourself from an impact perspective. So they have to have clarity on what is their vision. They must be clear on what they're passionate about, and then they must hone it to make it impactful.
Okay. Are there any inborn, do I call them skills or characteristics that one needs to have to become a good lawyer? Because I know there's some people who say, I'm not good at conversations or discussions or stage fright or whatever it is that is a limitation. Is it something that you need to have, or is it something that you need to acquire? Are lawyers born or are they made? What's your take on that?
That's a very interesting question. In my perception, I think I would like to say that skills are built. And lawyers, like any other profession, is about training. Some of the things that you will see about yourself is your response to injustice, as an example. The kind of issues that you respond to. People who are keen on bringing and influencing change. Those are things that you realize that come with the space. So you would want to be very keen as a parent also, and also as a young person, as a young upcoming professional. You would want to be keen on what are your key areas of interest, what kind of influence would you like to have, and accordingly then how do you act upon it? Because the question of being born a lawyer is one thing, but to also be able to go through the motion. It is wrong for me to sit here and tell you that the process is simple. But you find that if you approach it from a passion perspective, it then gives you an easier sailing journey to get to the other end. So you'd be able to simply navigate the process of training and learning and understanding, because there's a general presumption that all you need to do is to be good at cramming. But you must be able to learn to understand some principles and also be able to apply themselves in that particular place of understanding. So I would encourage someone to always migrate from a point of what they're passionate about. Because again, many are called and few are chosen. And it's prudent that you have that clarity that it's important for you to also guide yourself in that space and understand that this is what you're interested in, and you'd actually want to see yourself on the other end. So that gives you a lot of drive and motivation to actually complete the race.
Okay. So you finish now your first degree, and then after that you go to Kenya School of Law. How was that phase like, Kenya School of Law?
I usually have this kind of conversation with my team at the office, and the kind of thing that lawyers never really admit is that lawyers do not have a difficulty in admitting when they're wrong and when they're not able to do something, because you find the demand for you to be able to get into a 4-year law degree is a very good grade in undergraduate. So principally, most of these lawyers are smart people from the context of the scales of KCSE. So when you go to law school, like my year, we were admitted 1,300 and something, and we were only able to admit 124 at the first try. So the level of resilience you also need to build to be able to cross over into from being a lawyer. It's good I draw that distinction. Once you have a law degree, you're a lawyer. You have been given the power to read law. And then to be able to practice, now you become an advocate of the High Court. You now go for the 2-year program at the Advocates Training College at the Kenya School of Law, which is usually the most tasking and most complex of it, because now you're just coming from a theoretical perspective into a practical training perspective. So that resilience is really necessary for you to be able now to be able to complete the 6-year program, for you to now start being a pupil, to start learning how to practice law. So principally, I think, in a nutshell, if you're able to now bridge the gap between the theory and the practice, and also build your resilience to understand that you might not get it right in the first try, but you try again until you're admitted. Yes.
So I've always had this question. You've done the law degree, and you might be didn't qualify at the KSL, or didn't finish, or whatever reason. What can you become apart from, because I know you can't become an advocate, but are there anything, other thing you can do with a basic law degree without KSL?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think we also need to open up the people interested in the field to the available options, as far as, because most of us, or even myself, when I was commencing my journey of becoming an advocate, I only knew in the back of my mind the traditional sense of a lawyer who goes to court and defends cases, and if it's civil or criminal. But it is important that young and upcoming people also understand that a law degree is applicable in other aspects without necessarily being an advocate of the High Court. Myself, I have interns who have just degrees, and they support us in legal research and writing. They also support in what we call community paralegal engagement. So as a paralegal, you have the ability to give legal opinions, but you cannot give legal advice, because your opinion is based on research, but advice is based on your capacity to practice and implement that advice. So there's an availability of an avenue to apply yourself as a legal researcher. Also, you can enhance your degree and become a master of law, which now enables you to even lecture and teach law without necessarily being an advocate. What you will find even in a corporate and commercial setting is most lawyers, in-house lawyers, do not necessarily strictly practice law. There may be a requirement for you to be an advocate, but in most cases, if you work for a bank, you will rarely be the one to represent the bank. Your perspective would be to offer legal management and manage a panel of advocates who will be now practicing on behalf of the institution. So those are there are so many other options that you can apply yourself in. In terms of policy and strategy, you would require just to have an understanding, a basic understanding of the legal landscape from being a lawyer as a holder of a law degree, and then understand the systems of governance. Personally, that was my entry point. How I became an advocate is a story for another day, but as I started out by learning the options that I had as far as the degree, because as I mentioned, we had a bit of a challenge transitioning between undergraduate and law school, because law school is quite expensive and it is not financed by the Joint Admissions Board. I don't know what it is called right now.
They call it help or what?
Yes, no, we don't get help for KSL. So for me, the transition was quite difficult, because now I had to move from having a law degree to working odd jobs and trying to raise some funds. And in the process, I got involved in policy work. So you learn that you can actually use your law degree in a different field, not necessarily requiring you to be an advocate. So that's what we say, ukivunjika unga mwiko, sio mwisho wa kupika ugali. So you can alternate into a different field and still thrive as a lawyer.
And of course, your take on this?
Well, I love the discussion, and I now see why lawyers are what they are right now. Like when he talked about being argumentative, being, the go-getters, I now see what really fuels you people. Because when I see the landscape of law and things like that, because you are so very many of you who are in the field, so now today I get to know that it is not everyone who has studied law becomes an advocate. It is really diverse. It's really diverse. And now I can know why lawyers are very, really, can I say argumentative? I am lacking that kind word, because even in the Bible, when you look at it, Jesus had a very hard time with you people. They're always, they're always confronting him.
Equating lawyers with the Pharisees.
The Pharisees.
Sadducees, teachers of the law.
So I really now see you guys, this is who you are, it's something that is now really broad. Now that to see an advocate, that is something now I really relate with and appreciate, because I remember the first time I really faced with the need to have a lawyer is when my mother was imprisoned. My mother is the pastor. So you see there are these, call them washirikas in the church. So he had to stand in for one who had a loan. So my mother came in as a guarantor. Guarantee. You have to be keen with the words when you have a lawyer here. A guarantor.
He will always correct you.
He will always correct me. Yeah, you will correct me. So she came in as a guarantor, and what happened is the guy he was standing in for was not able to pay the loan. So we really faced it hard. Someone may call it smelling the coffee for us. I didn't have any mind of having a lawyer in any place. I didn't think of a lawyer in any way. But that time, that is when I knew what lawyers are capable of and why you need one at this time. So it was really a challenge, but I thank God we went through that, and I really learned that you don't just sign statements, you don't just guarantee anyone. So lawyers are really relevant in this age, and there's so much to take today. Doctor.
I have a question to you from what you said. Can you just go to court and represent yourself and you're not a lawyer and I'm not an advocate?
Yes, but we don't recommend, because from a capitalistic perspective, and also just to give a bit of background, in the previous constitution, the one that was our independence constitution, we did not have what we call the right of audience for normal and ordinary citizens. The Constitution of Kenya 2010, the one that we promulgated, now enables and empowers you, even the civil procedure rules and even the criminal procedure code, if you are a party. Now, being a party means you are either directly interested or you have what we call next friend status. Next friend status means, for instance, if you are in a court matter and you have maybe a psychosocial disorder that negates your capacity to be able to speak in court, then a member of your family can stand in your place to then address court or things like that. And we have on record so many people self-representing in serious matters. I mean, the most recent one, the most high-profile one I can think is when Kamlesh Patni fired all his lawyers in the middle of the process, and he opted to self-represent. Of course, there are rules and aspects of self-representation that might negate your chances of success, because, of course, you fail to appreciate, as a citizen, you may fail to appreciate all the rules of court procedure in terms of what time you need to respond, what time you have to file maybe a reply, and that also impacts, because sometimes rules of procedure can be the technicalities that make your matter not be very prudently defended or prosecuted. So we wouldn't recommend it, because also you approach it from an emotional perspective. Whatever issue it is, you would not approach it as objectively as an advocate would. Because from outside looking in, I can be able to tell you this case is going to go bad for you. This is what I think you should do. But yourself, you are convicted that I am right and you could be absolutely wrong. So the idea is to either get yourself involved in these community paralegal trainings that just give you a basic, bare minimum understanding on judicial processes, legal processes, rules of procedure, what to engage in. And there are so many matters that many people have successfully, that we have supported them to actually successfully defend or prosecute. So it is possible by law for you to self-represent, but we wouldn't recommend it because you interfere with our children accessing bread, and you, and you also may not necessarily give yourself the best chance of success.
Okay. Now you finished KSL, Kenya School of Law, for those who are listening and following that thread. And now you've qualified. What was next for you?
So once you finish your Kenya School of Law comes in 2 phases. So you have the practical learning phase where you do classwork, coursework, and research. So once you're done with that, you will take written exams, and then you have what we call oral exams. So oral exams are principally, you visit a panel and they interview and interrogate you on a field of law that you would probably be practicing. It's structured and part of your grade. So you'll then step into a phase what we call pupillage. So pupillage is where you're supposed to undertake a 6-month training under a qualified advocate who is of good standing and above 5 years of practice. So you can take a pupil if you're an advocate of above 5 years standing, a maximum of 2 pupils. So the presumption here is the advocates training program will now be completed by a practical phase of training. So now it's where you are guided. You are not yet an advocate. So you still do not have the right to address the courts. You do not have the rights to give legal advice. So the principle here is that you are now under tutelage. So you'll be following and shadowing a pupil master who will then be showing you the ropes in terms of rules of procedure. This is how, because there's what the law writes and what the law reads, and then there's what the law is on the ground. So you hear what is on the ground is different between what is on paper. So if you are fortunate enough to meet a pupil master who helps you navigate and understanding the landscape of principally building a lot of social skills that also reinforce your academic understanding, then they can build your ability to navigate in practice. So you're supposed to do criminal litigation, civil litigation, corporate and commercial work. So 6 months is usually not adequate time, in my opinion, to be able to understand all fields of law so that you can also be able to know where you would fall in. But in that 6 months, you should be able to structure your pupillage in a way that you move through all the departments of the firm and you're able to interact with the procedural aspects of each of these departments in each of these departments and just build a common understanding. Now in this phase, you will be tasked with drawing documents. If it is court documents, you draw pleadings, you go and file them, you interact with the process of filing. So in that period, you're actually doing a lot of clerical work, principally just to build your understanding of what your practice training was. After that, then you will file a document in court in court and with the Kenya School of Law and the Council for Legal Education. So the Council for Legal Education is the institutional moderator for legal training. So they will issue what we call a certificate of compliance, which principally shows that you have completed both the advocates training program and passed all your exams, and you have successfully completed the tutelage process of pupillage. So that certificate, together with an advocate, your pupil master will give you a certificate of completion, noting that you have finished, and then you yourself will now petition the Chief Justice to be admitted as an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. So it's a judicial application that is heard in chambers. There is no hearing for it. So the idea is that the advocate section in the judiciary will just review all your paperwork. You will serve it to the judiciary, the Council for Legal Education, and the Law Society of Kenya. So you'd make this application in 4 copies. Of course, the 4th copy, the assumption is your file copy. Once you do that, then you go into a process of what we call gazettement. So once the Council for Legal Education, the Law Society of Kenya, and the judiciary have had an exchange and they are satisfied that you have satisfied the rules under the Advocates rules, under the Advocates Act, then they can gazette you for admission as an advocate. In this process, there's something called a certificate of moral fitness. Now, a certificate of moral fitness principally speaks to your adherence to ethical and moral issues within the Law Society program practice rules. So principally, have you been an honest pupil? Have you been an honest student? And that petition can also be negated if someone was to question your moral fitness. So your moral fitness is sworn by your pupil master or advocates who know you and know your conduct. And once that is satisfied, then upon gazettement, you're now enabled to sign the roll. Once you sign the roll, you get what we call a P105 number. A P105 number is principally like your advocate's ID number. So that is where, if anybody of the viewers would like to verify whether I'm an advocate, if they were to Google my name, my office details, my P105 number, and my years of practice and status of ethical will now come up in the LSK search engine. So at the point where you sign the roll is when now you become able to practice, because that's when you're issued with what is called a certificate of admission to the bar, which enables you to practice in the High Court and all subordinate courts in the country.
So now you've graduated from law school, you have your certificate to practice, you're out there. What was next for you?
I was one of the few fortunate young advocates to, one, work under mentors who were really keen on seeing me succeed. And I think this is one of the key bridges that young advocates struggle with, is a clear mentorship model that does not seek to milk you, but it seeks to make you flourish. So as also advocates, one of the key things that I would like to advise young lawyers is always be very keen on how you select the people who have an influence and a bearing on your career, because they really mold how you view the profession. Because if you were to find an oppressive, and it's possible because you've had similar cases where people masses have really taken a toll on advocates, making some of them even decide to abandon the practice. So don't just be in a rush, because you see there is a saying that when you're hungry, you will eat anything. Don't just be in a rush to get into a space of pupillage. Also scout intentionally where you want to go to get that training. Because I was among the few fortunate people who worked under a boss who was really willing to see me flourish. So his concept was learn as much as you can from here, but if you ever need support to set up or to move forward, then I would be willing to give you that kind of support. So his training extended not only to just the principles of legal practice, but the principles of establishing and sustaining a business, and also the relationships that come with that. So once you're out there, you have two options. Okay, you have several options, but I can zero in on two. You could opt to be employed as an advocate. Principally what we have is, after you're done with pupillage and you're admitted, the firm that you're working with will probably opt to retain you in a period we call holding over. So that period of holding over is a period where now you're now transitioning from a pupil to a junior associate. So as a junior associate, you will now be tasked with matters within your forte, your area of expertise, and then you can run with them. So the assumption is, if you go that direction, the upward mobility would be, you can be, based on how the structure of the firm is, you can be a junior associate, senior associate, first junior associate, then you can become an associate, a senior associate, and then eventually you can become a partner if the structure allows. The alternative for me was, immediately I signed the role of advocates. Back in the day, I just walked straight into Sharia House and I registered my firm, same day. I had initially registered as a consultancy. So cumulatively, I have 13 years of experience in the space. But I registered my firm upon admission. So now I have my 8 years of practice, post-admission practice experience. So there is where you are enabled to, previously, the previous law did not allow you to open a firm until you have practiced for a minimum of 2 years under someone else's tutelage. Now, lawyers being lawyers, we went to court and we said that that was a discriminative provision of the law, because this is an open market. So let everybody be able to take their chances as far as the profession is concerned and building their practices. So we ended up changing that particular provision, and now someone who has been admitted, provided you're an advocate and you satisfy the rules that will now enable you to practice on your own, you are able to set up shop immediately. So you can go the route of self-employment, or you can be an advocate who's working in a law firm or an institution as the two principal options for you upon admission.
Okay. We'll take a short break after a minute or so, and we'll come to the issue of you setting up and exactly what you do and your area of expertise. But before we take this break, maybe you can tell the viewer, what is your area of expertise?
All right. I am principally, I'm a corporate commercial advocate. So corporate commercial advocate means I support commercial transactions, I support business institutionalization and policy establishment, and I support governance and policy and governance aspects in a nutshell. That does not necessarily then exclude me from all other areas of practice. I still conduct general legal practice within the framework of my firm, with supporting partners within each specific departments having expertise in the same, and myself also offering technical support to that extent. So my brain works best in corporate commercial law, and that is where I have zeroed in as the main partner in my firm, but I also have advocates who support all other aspects of general practice of law.
Might be before we take the break, just break down what is corporate commercial to an ordinary person.
All right. So corporate commercial means anything that is corporate in terms of business. We will support you in proposal establishment. We will support you in institutionalizing. If you want to establish a business or either a business or a limited company, we can guide you on the options that you have. Commercial means any commercial transaction. So we will talk about, for instance, conveyance as an example, sale of chattels, that's movable property. And also, I can even go as far as include corporate restructuring, financial and institutional guidance. How do you plan your risk assessment and risk mitigation? Because then there are aspects, tax, there's aspect of tax risk, there's an aspect of personal exposure in terms of liability. So for instance, myself as an individual, how am I a separate entity from my businesses, and what is the best model to protect myself from the liabilities of my businesses? So in a nutshell, I think that's a good definition of what a corporate commercial advocate would be doing for you. But of course, we extend further to civil, because corporate commercial transactions will now lead us to civil and criminal litigation. So we would still go to court on civil issues to solve disputes that come from corporate perspective. We are also chartered arbitrators. So we would also help you in alternative dispute resolution models.
So my dear viewer, we are taking a short break, and prepare your questions, start sending them in. We'll take the questions after the discussion. Thank you, and stay tuned.
I wrote a book, a powerful book, that is 7 Keys to Success. All of us want to succeed. Nobody here wants to fail. I have no doubt you have a deep-seated desire how to succeed, but you wonder how. There are principles in this book. I call them keys. There are 7 of them that I have elaborated, that I have discussed in this book, and I have no doubt when you read this book, well, you will succeed. Many people have read it and they have come. The other day I met somebody who told me, well, I read your 7 keys to success and I have been teaching from that book. Actually, she's a pastor, and she told me, well, I actually bought several, I have given to my leaders, to my people. You can use it also for teaching and even blessing other people in your family, church, and friends, even your place of work. 7 keys to success. I have no doubt when you read this book, you will succeed. Failure is not your place to be. You can be successful by reading 7 keys to success. Call that number, send a message, and we will respond to you and send you a copy of this book. God bless you, and see you soon. Hello there, and praise be to our God. For the last 21 years, we have been rescuing abandoned babies all over this country. And by God's help, we have been able to rescue now close to 1,000 babies in this country. Well, we thank God for his enabling power. But again, I want to thank all our partners and friends of Happy Life children's home that have come alongside us to work with us, to help us to feed these children. Right now we have 61 babies, we have toddlers, we have some in school, we have some in primary school, in high school, school fees, vocational training, and it's not easy, but I want to ask, you can partner with us. You can help one of these children. You can be a monthly partner of any amount, whether you are a student, whether you are working, you are a parent, young people. I want to call upon each one of us. We can do something. Well, I always say nobody has everything, but everybody has something. And at Happy Life Children's Home, we have a saying, you may not change the whole world, but you can change the whole world for one child. We have a pay bill there. I want to ask you right now, please send help for these children. The pay bill is 75512. I repeat again, the pay bill number is 75512. That is 75512. That is the pay bill for Happy Life Children's Home account. You can indicate your name, and we will be more than glad to receive this help for the children, for the many, many abandoned children. Actually, our place is right now full. We cannot even take more. People are abandoning children everywhere. But I want to ask that you can work with us and also become a Happy Life friend, where you can become a monthly partner. If you want to do that, you can send a message or call that number or send a WhatsApp message, and we will be able to communicate with you and tell you how you can become a friend of Happy Life. God bless you. I invite you again, be a part of this journey. For the last 21 years, God has been faithful. You can be part of what God is doing through Happy Life Children's Home, Happy Life Mission, in educating these children and even supporting them with the food, milk, diapers, and everything that they need for their daily living. God bless you, and God bless you. The Bible says, as I close, well, he who gives to the poor lends to God. If you give to the poor, you are lending to God. And God is not a debtor of anyone. He will reward you. Thank you, and God bless you.
Faith Today TV is here to make your brand outstanding. Worry not on where to advertise your business or your products. Call us on 0114 777 000 or email us on info@faithtodaytv.co.ke.
Thank you very much, our dear viewer. We are grateful that you are still tuned in after that short commercial break. We are discussing with Mr. Kereba Kariuki on navigating the legal landscape, a conversation with a young, promising lawyer. And we had a very interesting first session, and would want to pick it up from there. And we're discussing about a business, and you said you are passionate about corporate commercial. What do you call it? Corporate commercial law.
Yeah.
Let's pick it up from there. Once again, what is that?
Principally, it's just the interface between the business world and the legal world. Mm-hmm. So bridging the compliance perspective. So when you want to do business, then what are the legal provisions, for instance, that you'd require at all levels of business? So we're looking at it from a micro level. So what are the issues that you need to do as far as compliance is concerned? What are the aspects of registration? Then what are the other institutional policies and frameworks that you need to put in place to remain compliant? Because compliance is a continuous cycle. and also what are the issues that you need to also ensure that you're consistent on as far as that is concerned.
In this program, a lot of our viewers are in business. The viewership is mostly people who either are in business or want to start a business. Take us through, how do you start a business from a legal lens? Because I know there are people who start a business because they have money, so they think about the marketing, the stocks and all that. But they forget about the legal aspects of setting up a legal entity. So what are the various options? If somebody has some money, has some business idea, has already secured a premise somewhere, has the stocks, where does the lawyer come in to help this person get started in a legal way, so that you don't get harassed by Kanjo every other day?
Yeah, that's a very important question, because it also brings in aspects of compliance. Ideally, you will be guided by three things. You'll be guided by, number one, what is the nature of business that you want to engage in? Because the nature and type of business will have an implication on the nature and type of registration that you go into. So number two, then, do you want to register? That's the other thing. And number three, why do you want to register? So when we talk about the nature of business, I can use a law firm as an example. For most service-oriented businesses, you will be required to, because what you're giving is your professional undertaking to offer quality service, the law will then require you to be personally bound to the business, because the guarantee is you. So then that means that a law firm, as an example, is registered under a business name regime or a partnership regime, because the liability attaches to the individual who is the name behind the firm. When you want to have a business as a general, maybe retail outlet as an example, you may opt to register this as a business name, a partnership, or a limited liability company. So I would like to quickly distinguish the three.
Okay.
So a business name is principally the cheapest and easiest way to enhance, to create and register a business. You can be able to now, because the question had come up in the previous session, can you self-represent in court? Now, in this particular aspect of all types of business registration, you can self-represent. Anybody who has access to an internet interface, a computer, and knows how to navigate their way around eCitizen would be able to register a business on their own. Because the system within the eCitizen, and that's one very good thing that the government has done. Dr. Mungai will agree with me that previously it was quite complicated to be able to do some of these things. You'd have to go to Sharia House and queue up for almost a day, or even more sometimes, to be able just to get a business, just to even get a search of the business name. But the eCitizen interface has made it simple to the extent that you can simply log on, put in the three names that you have as an alternative in order of priority, pay, download and sign the forms, and then upload them, and then pay and wait for registration within 10 days. So for a business, it can be as simple as that. You may not necessarily require to have an advocate.
So basically here you just have a business name.
So here you have a business name that is personal liability to the individual who owns the business.
And sorry to say, in times past, I don't know if it's still a tradition today. If you're a man and the wife or spouses, just took the short forms of their names. So if it's Veronica Kamau, they start a company, Verokama Enterprises, you know? You can just go and register that and...
Yes, absolutely. Because what the system now provides is, previously we used to do a name search and reservation process, but now the system has made this into a single process. So when you start out with the application process, you'll be required to put in three names in order of priority. So whichever model, of course there are rules surrounding the types of names. You can't abbreviate, you can't use profanity, you cannot use a name that is already existing in another franchise. So once you put in your names, the system itself will check of the three names which is the name that can apply. And then if it is a name that is not in use, the system will automatically issue you with that particular name as your business name. So yes, nothing stops them from taking the abbreviations of their names, provided the name then is not first a passing off of another business. Like you cannot register Kingdom Network business because it's already existing as a used name by another franchise. Of course, if you have registered it. If you have not, it's just something that you're using, then it is open to be taken up by someone else. So the reservation is just principally a name that is ordinary. You don't use any profanity, and you cannot use a short form. Yeah.
So is there any advice you have on choosing a name, apart from that, from a legal point? Is a name important? Enoch, is a name important in a business?
Well, I think a name is very important because that is what really communicates to the people what you are offering to, the service you are offering to the people. So if you don't have a clear name, people will find it hard to really understand what you are offering. So I believe a name is key.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now that's the first one. So it's a business name. So the second type of business you can register?
So you can register a partnership. And partnerships are in two forms. So there is a limited liability partnership and there is a basic principal partnership. So a partnership comes in place where you do not want to register a limited liability company. Of course, there are differences in terms of cost implication as well. A limited liability company would cost you upwards of 15,000 to self-register, and even up to 50 to 100,000 if you require the services of an advocate. A partnership will then be where we want to get into business with Enoch. And a business name will not necessarily suffice. So we might want to have a partnership so that at the very least our terms of engagement are clearly set out in a partnership deed, but then it's still a business name for all intent and purpose. Only aspect is here now, there are interests of two individuals or three or even four, right? So that can be a principal partnership. So you can, if you're doing it on eCitizen, you can select the type of business, and then you can select either business, a partnership, limited liability partnership, company, limited liability company, or company limited by guarantee. So as we go, I'll also explain. So for a partnership, it's principally bringing one or two or more people into a business arrangement, guided by a partnership deed, which you can choose to draw yourselves, your terms of engagement, your proportionality of profit, your proportionality of investment. About a business name in a partnership is always remember that the liability is personal. For instance, if we go to court, if you go to a bank and you take a loan, as you had said, the assumption is in a partnership, both of you are guaranteeing each other for the value of recovery of the loan, for instance. So the liability is personal, is not separate from, the business liability is not separate from the individuals. So in the aspect of recovery, then nothing stops anyone who's recovering from coming directly to recover from the individuals. Yes.
Okay.
So now enters the aspect of limited liability. So if you want to register a company that is an absolute separate entity from the individuals, you have to bring in the aspect of limited liability. So when we talk about limited liability, we're talking about principally limiting your interest to the interest in the business. So if a company has if a limited liability partnership has shares to the extent of 100 shares, you value those shares at 1,000 shillings each. The total value of the company is 100,000. So if you have 30 shares in that particular company, your liability and also your interest is limited to the 30%. So for instance, if we go and take a loan and there is a dispersion of interest, so one has 30%, one has 10%, one has 20%. If there's an aspect of recovery, the bank can only recover you to the extent of your interest. So if the loan is 1 million, the person holding 30% interest will be liable to pay up to 300,000 shillings because their liability is limited. Now, this is commercial law 101.
Yeah.
For that to happen, someone has to actually seek leave of court to now get to the individual. It is not automatic that they can come directly to you. It's a process we call lifting the veil of incorporation. So principally, a company is a separate entity, and the individuals behind the company are separate entities. In the event that this company cannot discharge its obligation, or the limited liability partnership cannot discharge its obligation, then you have to make another application to court to now come to the individual shareholders but still it will be limited to their interests. Yeah. So when we talk about a limited liability partnership, we're principally saying it is limited to your interest, a percentage of your interest, similarly. And then now we enter the perspective of a limited company. So limited companies are what you call LTDs. You'll see someone has a Kingdom Business Network Limited, right? So this is a limited liability company. It is similar to the partnership to some extent, only that now you actually conclude different forms to be able to set up a limited liability company. But the principle is the same, that you're limited, the liability, literally what it is called, limited liability. So your liability is limited to the extent of your ownership of the company. So previously we had an instance where you could not have less than 2 directors for a limited liability company. That is not the current situation under law. Right now you can be 1 director. You can be able to set up a limited liability company, and if you use a lawyer, that limited liability company can be a tool of safeguarding of all your interests against any form of exposure. Of course, that instruction has also to be clear that I would like to have a company that, worst case scenario, can never come back to my individual assets. And it's a good model for protection of your other interests. You can have a company specifically for holding your property. So the company is yours, but it's the one that owns your properties. So you do not have any personal, which is a model I've also applied for myself. So ideally you just principally safeguard yourself from any form of your personal liability getting to the company, and the inverse is also possible, that the company liability cannot come to you. Now, if you want to run a non-profit, because that is also something that young people are really interested in.
An NGO now.
An NGO, civil society organization. All right, so it's good to draw the distinction, because an NGO, you will register it under the moderation of the National Non-Governmental Organizations Board. So there's an NGO board specifically for registering NGOs, which has a clear model for regulation under the NGOs. And it has a very tedious and a longer process of vetting before you get to the level of adoption. Now, if you want to run a non-profit, which is principally a civil society organization, you can register what we call a company limited by guarantee. Now, a company limited by guarantee is principally a limited liability company, but not for profit. So it is not a profit-making entity. It is more of a social enterprise. So when you say limited by guarantee, we principally say that you can get 2 or 3 guarantors that we were having a conversation on earlier, who can say we will guarantee this company to this extent. So they set the level of guarantee. So sometimes it's 30,000, sometimes they can say 35,000, and the liability of that non-profit can never be beyond, to those guarantors, can never be beyond that 30,000 shillings, because the presumption is this is not a profit-making entity. Yes. So those are the few examples that you have, and the more complex you'd like to set up a corporate structure, the more complex the levels of registration and the requirements get. Yeah.
Let's get to risks. There's been, I don't know whether it was an old constitution or is a new constitution. Previously, if you had a limited liability company, and might be you took some loans and you were unable to pay, they would, I think, just only limit themselves to suing the company and not the individual. Has that changed in the current constitution? Can they, for example, come for your property should the limited liability company fail to deliver on their own obligations?
That's a very interesting question. We can address, ideally, let me state that it can be addressed on a case-by-case basis, based on the circumstances of coming up with that, and the level of guarantee as well. Because you'll find that some financial institutions will be keen on seeking a guarantee, a personal guarantee. One of the reasons why you need a lawyer before you sign loan documents. In most cases, yes, they usually take it or leave it. The bank will not allow you to input on the standard forms. They just tell you sign here, 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 and most of us never read this. But there is usually a clause that we call personal guarantee clause. So principally what the personal guarantee clause will do is to build on the corporate liability to extend to personal liability. So ideally, when you talk about lifting the veil of incorporation, we're talking about what Dr. is saying. The company has taken a loan with Equity Bank of 1 million, and they are unable to discharge the debt. The total value of the company's assets at the time is around 420 million shillings, thousand. So there is a deficit of around 580,000. So how does the bank recover the deficit? So the personal guarantee allows the bank to come directly towards the individual director shareholders. Now what that happens is this. Once you sign the personal guarantee, the bank is allowed to make an application to say, oh look, when Karaoke was taking this loan, he signed this particular perspective, and now we are allowed to extend the liability beyond the corporate veil. So moving away from the assets of the corporation, moving towards his individual assets. Yeah.
Wonderful. Now, my dear viewer, it's time to start taking your questions, and I have quite a number of questions. Thank you for the enthusiasm. Thank you for sending questions to us. We still have got a window of about 10 minutes remaining. Please send them fast and furious. The lawyer is here, is going to answer your questions free of charge. He's going to give you consultation. We start with the first one. Somebody is saying here, this is Fred. Thank you, Fred, for watching. He says, what makes a good lawyer, really? Because as it stands, you have to be a school genius. What if I failed and I want to pursue law?
That's a great question, Fred. I think what makes a good anything is building on your craft. And I really like how this principle was brought out by one of the people I follow, Joshua Salman, who speaks about the concept of honing your skill. You see, allow me to just digress into a biblical explanation, where he was talking about the period between Joseph becoming prime minister and his wait in the prison. So there's an aspect of how do you grow your gift? Because the reality is there was no additional perspective to his gift while he was in prison. He's just another interpreter of dreams. So while in prison, what does he do? He is talking to the cupbearer. He is talking to other people. I will presume that the Bible only records 2, but there has to have been other people in the prison who are dreaming, right? So he honed his skill and improved it to a level that he was now able. Yeah, you're told, the Marines have a saying that says, be ready so you do not need to get ready. So when the opportunity came, when he was now called into the palace, then he has already understood in his mindset that I am not coming back to prison. So he wants to be, like right now, if the president sends his men to call you, you'll rush because the president has called you. But he knew that he's now ready for a different level of his life. So he was shaving. He asked for a different garment so that when he presents himself, he's not taken as just another prisoner who can interpret dreams, but someone who can add value to process. So when you're asking yourself, how do I become this? Some of us would shock you. We have even the Chief Justice, the lady Chief Justice, got a C+. Yeah, okay. She got a second law, she admittedly so, she got a second law in her undergraduate. And it's not a question of it's how you use what you have and how you build on what you already have. Because ideally, getting to that level, it's called a practice for a reason. You practice, you learn, you relearn, you unlearn. Some of us have made very grievous mistakes in our growth process, but you learn from your mistakes and you build upon them, and then eventually you get there. I would be one to say that you don't necessarily require to be a genius to be an advocate, and that's a wrong approach to it. I think practice makes perfect is the best perception. Approach yourself. Even I keep on learning and relearning and learning and teaching myself new things and new models of doing things. So I would encourage anybody out there, not just Fred, who feels that this is a path they would want to pursue, proceed and do it, and take a step at a time and give yourself credit as you go, as you're learning new things, and eventually you'll get to the intended outcome.
Now, this is very interesting. I have 2 comments from our viewers, and thank you for the interesting comments. You keep the show alive. The first comment is a lady who wanted to pursue law until the mother told her that all lawyers will not go to heaven. You'll comment on that. And I'll join that with Good Morning KBN. I once heard that lawyers can't be Christians because they have to lie for a living. Can our lawyer guest say something about this, about lawyers having to lie and lawyers not going to heaven? And are you a Christian to start with?
That's an interesting question. Yes, I am a Christian. I was having a discourse earlier with someone and I was telling them I'll be the receptionist in heaven. You'll probably meet me there right next to St. Peter, with whom I share a name. Do we lie for a living? I think that's a general misconception that we might want to clear out. Because you see, in Kenya we have what we call an adversarial system of justice. So adversaries means you're on one side, I'm on the other side. So it is for you to prove your case or for me to prove my case. Now, do we lie for a living? Not necessarily. But as officers of the court, you have an obligation to ensure that the wheels of justice turn correctly. And they grind as they should. So a case is only as good as it is presented. So if the prosecution, for instance, in a criminal case does not put up a very good case, even when someone is guilty, they will walk, because the obligation is on the one who is building the case to prove it. So if the defense lawyers are better than the prosecution, it is just like any other football match where you go and Arsenal lost yesterday. I apologize for Arsenal fans.
Don't talk about that.
But I'm also a fan.
Okay.
Yeah, Arsenal fans are going to heaven. I think our faith is tested and retested.
We have the hard skin, you know.
But we digress. Principally, as we proceed, the idea is to understand that our system dictates that we must all prove our cases. And sometimes where there is a nonchalant approach to a process and an engagement, then the better advocate always takes the day. It's not about cheating or lying. It's just principally about reinforcing the obligation that justice must not only be served, but it must be seen to have been served. We will not just prosecute you because in the court of public opinion you are a criminal, right? It has to be proven that you are a criminal. And where the prosecution fails and the defense takes the day, it's not because the lawyers are liars. It's because the defense was more prudent. Yeah. So here it's about backing your understanding with facts, presenting them well, and being able to articulate them. Because you have numerous cases, and you've seen a lot of reviews around the judiciary and how there are so many innocent people who've actually ended up in prison. So it is not about who has won what case. It is about how well is that case presented. Yeah.
Peter is asking, how do you integrate faith with your work and career? Thank you, Peter, for watching.
Peter, that's a very good question. I think there are two things that I learned from the onset of my career, and one of my mentors in this space, Mr. Vincent Kimosop, told me one thing that has already stuck to me. You can never have a business model founded on fraud. It is not sustainable. And that truth does not change color. So the idea is to first, you see, everything must be founded on some guiding principles. Yeah. And my guiding principles are, fortunately for me, faith-backed. So ideally, I would like to build a model business that is, first of all, a kingdom-oriented business, because at the end of the day, and Miles Monroe puts this very proper, that if you use anything against the intended purpose, it will never it will never give you any outcome. This cup was meant to take tea. Yeah. If you try to use it to cook ugali, it is still a utensil, but it will not give you the intended outcome. So the intention, even in creation, was that we serve a broad-based. When you talk about dominion, how do you dominate without necessarily going through the manual? And even for me, as young people also always ask me, is I found myself thriving more when I started applying myself in the correct model. And the correct model for me was to get as closer to God's purpose as possible. And for someone my age, I can tell you the model is very effective. I can say that I have seen the clear interface from a kingdom approach to what the reality on the ground is. And when they ask us what we do, we tell them, "Ni God," and it is true, Ni God. Yeah. So yes, it is important that you try to anchor yourself on principles that will then guide your output. Because if you don't have a radar that is guiding your direction, then you're going nowhere very fast.
There you get it, my viewer. There are lawyers who are Christians and who have integrated faith into their careers. Not all lawyers are crooks. Not all lawyers have to lie. So here you go. Now, Shiko is asking, and thank you, Shiko, for watching. How do you negotiate a lawyer with your clients? I hear it's tedious agreeing with a lawyer.
First and foremost, advocates are guided in terms of minimum costings for our services. We have a legislative framework for guiding how much you can charge from a minimum perspective. It is called the Advocates Remuneration Order. So for us, as a matter of principle, we never undercharge. Undercharging by law is an offense. So you'd rather do pro bono work than to undercut. First and foremost for us, for clarity's sake, we are always guided by the Advocates Remuneration Order as we are setting it, and you can have that conversation with your client to know that this is as low as I can go. But also, it also depends on the type and model of business you're building, and also the market that you're selling. Because a lot is said about the value of an antique watch based on the market that you're selling it will change based on the audience that you're selling it to. So you must also have clarity on who is your target audience as a business, which market would you rather be selling, have clarity on why you want to set up shop, where you want to set up shop. Because this cup in Naivas sells very differently as the same cup would sell in Tiles and Carpet Center. So it depends on who is your client base, why have you set up there, what is your overall objective. Because if you want to do pro bono legal work and you want to have community impact-based work, you cannot set up your office at Villarosa Kempinski. And equally so, if you have a clear standard of billing and model, then you build your own credibility, because clients will be willing to pay for value. So find a way to bridge the gap between a service and selling value. Because I tell my team that we are in the process, we are in the business of selling solutions. So what we do is to solve your problem, and then you pay us handsomely. So the idea is to build an institution that is, of course, guarded by law. You have no alternative than to bill in accordance to the scale. The scale only sets a minimum. It does not set a minimum. That's why it's possible to pay one lawyer 10,000 and then still pay another lawyer for the same service 100,000. So there's a minimum, but it does not set a maximum.
So you can always negotiate for the minimum. I think that's what I get from that discussion. It's
depending on law firm.
Depending on the law, there's a law guideline, but you can always negotiate for the minimum. So lawyers are people like you can negotiate with them. Kendi, thank you very much for watching from Kiambu. We hear you loud and clear. You're saying that this is a very intellectual conversation. I love it. Thank you for loving this. My question to Kereba is, how do you deal with the cases that you lose? Do you get emotional? Do you take painkillers after that? And how do you console your clients?
That's a good question. My inception approach is usually very simple. We never take up a matter before we discuss the legal options by way of a legal opinion with the client. So it is prudent that I tell the client, for instance, if it's a succession matter, when they come, I'll tell them, these are the possibilities. If your succession is uncontested, it will be very cheap and very fast. But if you can go and build consensus with the family and come with an uncontested succession, that would be great. We can be able to do this very fast and conclude it. But it's also important that you tell that same client that should someone contest, this is the possible outcome. You might not win because of 1, 2, 3 things from the perspective of a legal analysis. And that also prepares the client for an impending alternative outcome. So, and that also helps myself or any member of my team to also understand that you might win some and you might lose some. It's never a good feeling to lose. We have tried to build a practice on telling clients the truth, because in most cases, and this is where many lawyers go wrong, you might really want to chase a fee note and get paid, but at the detriment of an outcome for your client. So sometimes we even encourage people to do alternative dispute resolution so that we can avoid an instance where you've spent time and money and then you end up losing in the process. So ideally for us is, one, our inception model is very clear. We will highlight your options for you, and that highlighting of options for you also helps to prepare us mentally. It's never easy to deal with any form of loss. As humans, we are keen to accolades and always winning and always taking names. But in the worst of cases scenario, sometimes you do not have the matters go your way. Some instances you go to court with your own clients and they turn hostile, and it makes you look out to be, especially in divorce matters. I have seen, and Enoch will tell us, there are so many memes of when you come to court with your divorce clients and they are now in a matching kitenge. Now you're the one who looks as though you are the antagonist in their marriage. And they even say, wakili, hawa mawakili ndio wanatupiganisha, yeah? So the idea here is to also understand the landscape that you're operating in, and to build a lot of resilience, institutionalized resilience building mechanism. And for me, it's from an inception of an honest conversation with a client. And you find that insofar as most clients also struggle with being told, this case is not very good, you're not going to win it if you go to court, eventually they always come back and say, they appreciate the fact that we did not waste their time, and they also end up being very so. Most of my clients, that is how our relationship started, because you might just chase a fee note, but you find that you are now on a downward trend like Arsenal. You're no longer on top of the table. You keep going. Anyway, I digress. Yeah, but principally you start from an inception of truth, an honest conversation on outcomes, and then manage your own expectations and manage your client's expectation.
I have very little time remaining, and I have 3 questions. So, Bwana Wakili, for the sake of my viewer who is very much interested in being heard, I'll just allow you 2 minutes for every question.
All right.
Be brief. Somebody is asking, is it asking or doubting? He's saying, we are getting free service. Yes? The answer is yes, you're getting free service today, or free advice. And this is a question she has, or he has. I have a small question. Can I keep my kids from controlling our entire inheritance at 18? I know it's a loaded question. These kids nowadays cannot be trusted easily. So the question is, I have a small question. Can I keep my kids from controlling our entire inheritance at 18?
I'll try and crash it down in 2 minutes. So what we're talking about is inheritance is principally about succession. So there are different models to build succession. The assumption here is, unfortunately, the parents might be dead by the time the kids are 18. That is an assumption. Then that kid will eventually come, now that young adult will eventually come to control the estate. So there's a way to go around that kind of a scenario, which is a way I encourage most of my clients to go, especially if you are what people would like to call a high net worth individual, or gearing towards being a high net worth individual. So most young professionals, most young couples, build an institutionalized succession plan. So an institutionalized succession plan principally means that there are specific parameters that those children would have to meet before they acquire wealth. Now, what that would require is a clear administration model. So that means there has to be another person who is then on top of things as they meet this milestone. Now, there are advantages and there are risks to this model, because also now what we are assuming is that that administrator will be a good and faithful servant, right? And we have seen cases in recent times with some of the most prominent people's estates where there has been a clear battle between their administrative supporters and the beneficiaries. Because to one extent, one feels that this one is taking advantage of this other one. There's no trust or basis of that, or there's that syndrome to want to take charge immediately. So yes, it is possible to do that. You build an institutionalized framework for succession that does not require any form of judicial intervention by way of a court succession process. So yes, that is a possibility, but it requires a lot of keen attention to detail as you're building it, because it is also still open to abuse if you do not do it the correct way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Following that is someone who is also saying, good morning, Bishop and my Ugandan friend. I'm glad today we are talking about law. I know lawyers are expensive, but I can use this opportunity to get free advice. Ha, 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 ha. How do I protect, the question is, how do I protect my children from abusive relatives if something happens to me?
I think this is one interesting conversation that as Kenyans and as Africans in general, we really run away from. And that is what we call willing and tested preparation. So principally what we're talking about is, how do I prepare for my absence? And how do I prepare my family and my beneficiaries for my absence? Because in the absence of any protective framework, then it is akin, and it is also clear, and it's been so many cases where relatives who are, even myself, we suffered a similar reality where relatives who are older than us, more experienced, more informed than us, took advantage of us in a process. So it goes back to the previous question. You have to build yourself up to a level where you understand writing a will does not necessarily mean make a bet that you're going to die. Yeah? Writing a will principally means that you're taking responsibility for eventuality and human nature, and how then can that impact your beneficiaries from enjoying the proceeds of your estate. So there's one model. You can write a will, all right? And then there's the corporate institutional model where we have a holding company that has clear shareholders and who are the interests and beneficiaries of the whole estate. So that means, like for instance, myself, I have divested myself of all my personal property. It is held in a company and there's clarity as to who gets what in the worst case scenario. The other alternative is, of course, dying with a will that shows clearly what goes what, that is properly written, properly witnessed, and properly registered, because wills are contested. So that one will require you to sit with an advocate, work through either building an institutionalized succession plan or drawing a tested model so that you have a will that can be registered and can be referred to, and the lawyer who draws it then reads it and enforces it upon your demise. Yeah.
The last question from Catalina. Thank you, Catalina, for writing to us. The question is, what problems or obstacles has Keriba had to overcome, and how did he do it? Maybe you can give us the top two.
Top two, number one, I think building a business is very difficult. It has its very clear challenges from the onset, especially if you're a young person and you're trying to navigate the business space. And secondly, there's the aspect of self-doubt and the questioning of whether or not you're applying yourself in the right area of your calling. Because as I said, that is the most important aspect of growth, that you apply yourself in the intended purpose. So how did I overcome it? I think the first perspective was to be in it. I had to get into business. I had to fight my way through it and just learn as I went. And I think the determination to build an institution, not only just for myself, but an institution that can be impactful locally, regionally, and globally, has been a very driving motivational factor that even on very, very rainy days, you still feel the urge to show up. And most of these battles in this space, you win when you show up. So to just build that resilience, to keep on doing it and keep on trying and keep on pushing. On the aspect of self-doubt, I think the question of whether lawyers are religious human beings is the answer to that question.
We're going to give you free legal advice for that. And with that, I would want to thank him very much for coming and sharing that insightful and intellectual conversation with a lawyer, young, promising lawyer. Thank you very much. I don't know what parting shots you have, Enoch.
Thank you so much. I am really excited about this conversation. I feel like we needed more hours, maybe a day, to really suffice. But what I have to say is that I feel like now we really need these lawyers in the picture. Not very many Christians appreciate the work lawyers do, because I imagine a scenario when a Christian is in the law, rather is in court, and then maybe the judge asks 2 + 3, you know, and then you're supposed to give an answer. You would think the answer is 5, but now the lawyer will tell you, what do you want it to be? So the lawyers, for us Christians, I now see the need to have a lawyer represent us, because it's not easy to deal with loss, you know, and failure. But I'm encouraged with the scripture. Even the Bible backs us. It says, when Jesus was really ascending, he said, I will leave you a helper, an advocate. That's when I appreciate now lawyers. You know, the Holy Spirit as our advocate. So it is important to marry this with the truth that in the world we are in right now, you may not suffice as an individual to stand in to defend yourself. You need someone who is knowledgeable as a young person or someone in business. You need someone who is knowledgeable, someone who is versed with the law to represent you. You may be right, yeah, but in the courtrooms, you may fail actually. But when you have a lawyer who has a Christian background, who has the truth, he can really help you succeed in your endeavors. So I really love this conversation. And like Doctor said, we will really need to have Mr. Karaoke back again and then you really answer these questions, because I'm sure there are Christians now who are excited to hear from what you have to deliver. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Enoch.
Yes.
Mr. Kariuki, Kiriba, your parting shots?
Thank you for having me. It's been quite an interactive session. We look forward to having more conversation, and just to encourage anyone who considers this field not to be afraid of the passport to heaven. They will get an opportunity if they do things right and they stay the course. So thank you very much, Dr. Thank you, Enoch, for having me, and we look forward to supporting another session.
Yeah, once again, thank you very much, Enoch and Mr. Kariuki Kiriba. And thank you very much, viewer, for listening to us, watching us. And please, if you like the video on YouTube, share, like, subscribe. We'll appreciate. And kindly, please send those questions now. Send them now. And God bless you. Thank you.